stream should be transferred. Here is the agenda in the chat. Okay, cool. On testing and release updates, we have a v0.12.3 release, which has a number of kind of the minor iterative work that's been done on the P2P spec that we will release a couple hours after this call. One of the main things I want people to take a look at is the modifications of message ID and gossip sub, but I'll discuss that in the release notes. Proto, do you want to give an update on, is Proto here? Proto's not here. Give me 1 second. I will give a brief update on what Proto's been working on. Proto's been working on something in kind of the direction of Hive for ETH2 that allows for easily spinning up testnets. It's kind of like automated multi-net kind of stuff, but controlled via local containers and can specify unit tests and things. So that is in the works. It's very close to being usable. So hopefully some good stuff comes out of that in the next week or so. Any other testing or release updates?
Do we have any plans on merging the fork choice spec tests into the official repo?
The current plan is to leave those as is and to use the testing framework that Proto's been working on to be able to run fork choice tests through the network interface rather than inserting blocks through a non-standard method. I think this is going to be easier to specify. I think this is going to be easier to test, but we'll see what that looks like in about a week or so.
Got it.
I'd say that sounds a little bit more complicated. I mean, the fork choice is, after all, like, a function.
Yeah, fair. But ultimately, the fork choice is something that there's a standard interface to kind of hook into clients through there. I mean, how they are fed blocks. But
the issue with a full testnet is that some of the interesting edge cases only happen like when you have a chain reorg and you invalidate almost the whole epoch. How would you induce that into Proto's framework, for example?
if you have one producer and one consumer, then you essentially get to decide exactly what the other node sees. So for example, if you spin up a Nimbus node and you have a rumor that's producing all of the blocks and attestations, then that Nimbus node now sees exactly what you feed to the network. All right, I don't feel very strongly about this one. I would rather have Proto here to defend it. He's been thinking about it a little bit more than I have.
My main concern is that, as Jacek said, it's easier to test just a function because with a network test, you also bring like lost attestations or messages into the fold,
Right.
and with the changes with gossip and discovery, it's better. I think if we test in isolation what we can.
Hey, there's Proto. We were just discussing, hey Proto, we were discussing the pros and cons of essentially kind of testing the fork choice through network tests versus the unit tests. Do you have opinions here that you'd like to share?
So, well, fork choice is not just the algorithm that matters, but also lots of integration. So just don't underestimate that part of fork choice.
Can you go deeper into what you mean by integration?
So fork choice, you keep track of this pool of attestations, the latest attestation, and so on. You need to fetch them from the gossip. There's more. It's not just a state machine. And I think most of these bugs happen when like either information about like which blocks are known or which attestations get inserted at what time is what really matters. And we already have unit tests per client for just the fork choice state. We could enhance that and extend it with more test cases, but I think the bigger thing that's uncovered or not covered well enough is the parts where it rinses the whole thing.
Okay. We're gonna move on. Spadina. I've been saying that wrong. Josh Stark. Correct me. Afri, are you around? Would you like to talk about that a little bit? I can take it. I know that sometimes you can't talk during these calls. Okay, cool. So Spadina, the intention here is to have we talked about this on other calls. We're gonna launch testnet. It's gonna have a 3-day end of life. We can obviously do whatever we want with it after that point. We're just not committed to supporting it. The configuration is merged, and on Tuesday we plan on launching the Launchpad along with that configuration so that users can deposit. The minimum deposit count is, or minimum active validator count is 1,024, so that we don't have any worry about when that number is going to be hit. We can artificially hit that ourselves. That's about it. Genesis planned to be on September 29th. Questions? Okay. Client updates. Nimbus.
Hi. So the past 2 weeks has been very busy. We had several networking fixes in P2P regarding especially async and memory leaks. We still have some to hunt down. We had also a peer management improvement, and we have Gossip 1.1 ready and being tested using the Multinet script and spinning up some Kubernetes clusters with Prism, Lighthouse, and Nimbus, just to check if we have proper compatibility with 1.0 and 1.1 and how everything goes. On the core side of the Beacon node, we have merged slashing protection. We have in progress attestation aggregation with the validator client in validator and Beacon node split case. We have DB pruning. It's for now offline, but we plan to make it online as we go. And we have released a new sync algorithm that is significantly faster than the previous one. It's still not up to the level of Lighthouse and Prism yet, but we are working on that. And also, on the other hand, we have started the last phase of our audit. So this one is focused on everything related to validators. So secrets and key stores, Also, everything that has to do with attestation and block proposal, including slashing protection. We have also a gossip sub in scope, the RPC for beacon nodes and a validator client, the command line interface, and we have also asked the auditors to review our users' instructions just to make sure that we don't put something here that might be confusing and might have them lose either money or privacy. And that's it for us.
Great. Thank you. Teku.
Yeah. Hi. So on Teku side, we are improving sync algorithm to balance load better across multiple peers and be more resilient to bad peers. Also, we are working on validator endpoints for standard REST API. Also, some work is ongoing related to handling with subjectivity. Also, we added ARM support for Blast library. So our Raspberry users should now enjoy increasing sync speed. Also, on Discify side, we fixed some DOS vulnerabilities and also started implementing version 5.1. That's it.
Great. Thank you. Lodestar.
Hey, so we've been dormant on Vidasha for a while, running into mostly memory issues, and it seems like a lot of that's been fixed. We a lot of that was because we were storing all states in memory. Now we've broken up our block processing by checkpoint, and then now we store those checkpoint states in a separate cache, and it helps that we can prune our states a lot more intelligently. And also breaking up block processing by checkpoint gives us a chance for other tasks like network requests to also complete. Before when we had like long skip slot periods, we would be hogging the CPU because our block processing is synchronous, so it would just hog everything. Now we kind of await after every epoch. And with this pruning, we also needed state regeneration. And so we have that now. We can regenerate using the smallest number of steps based on whatever states we already have in memory. So that's all good. We also rewrote our fork choice and pulled it into a separate package. There were some bugs before. We were not using the right balances for attestations. Now it seems we are. And we're also, we've refactored our ETH1 data fetching for block production. It was just wrong before. So we're, and also in progress is our Gossip Sub 1.1 integration. It's still not there. So we're going to, in the next week, try to get like all of this merged, hopefully to be ready for Spadina.
Great. Prism.
Hey everyone, yeah, a few improvements recently. So fixed up a few DOS vector attack vectors that were brought up by Proto, and fixed a lot of our core logic to make it stronger against any sort of timeouts. We integrated validator exits and are end-to-end tested into our master branch. We integrated BLST and merged it into the master branch, so that's been really great. There's only a few issues with fuzz testing, but those will be resolved shortly. And started going full speed on ETH2 API implementation and integration. All of the protobuf definitions are done pretty much, and now it's just a matter of implementing the endpoints. And Terrence from our team started the weak subjectivity sync implementation after reviewing the spec, and also some initial work on peer scoring and fixing up the IPv6 integration. So yeah, that's pretty much it from our end.
Cool. Thank you. And Lighthouse.
Hello there. A few things to report. 2 new team members joining us, Sean and myself, Herman. Progress on the standard HTTP API. All the endpoints, beacon, debug, config, and validator implemented and tested. In fact, we have, with this new API, 256 validators running, doing well so far. There will be a code freeze for audits in the first week of October. For these audits, we will be implementing the shortcut method of weak subjectivity, where we will start from Genesis and wipe the database if the weak subjectivity point is violated. We intend, however, to refactor and support a more user-friendly forwards, backwards thinking in the medium term. We have in plans as well a new 0.3.0 version, which will include breaking changes to the database, CLI, and API. It will include, of course, the standard HTTP API we're working on. The ETA for this new version is 2 weeks. Meanwhile, our current 0.2x 0.29 version, in this case, will only be updated with critical fixes from this point. Also, I want to speak about the remote signer implementation we're working on. This will allow a central server to hold all your keys and perform the sign of objects remotely. This functionality is useful for staking of service platforms as well as users wanting to add an extra layer of controls to their private keys. We are upgrading our discovery protocol to this v5.1, not ready yet, but soon, maybe less than a week. And finally, we are improving our sync protocol to be more resilient to periods of non-finality and improve the speed of syncing. That's all. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thanks, Herman. And welcome. Okay. And I don't believe anyone from Nethermind is here, correct? Yeah. Great. Any research updates?
Hey guys, as you might have seen, there's an update on the weak subjectivity guide. I'm dropping a link to it right now. If you haven't checked it out, please check it out. In terms of the priority order in which you should implement it, you should first start with just implementing a basic version of the weak subjectivity sync, which is taking command line input of a checkpoint and making sure that the checkpoint is in the path of your sync. And if you want to provide some advanced safety features for your users, you may even input a state and make sure that the current slot tick is going to be within the safe weak subjectivity period of your input weak subjectivity checkpoint. I believe most teams have already started working on this, but if you haven't, please check it out.
Awesome. Thank you, Aditya. An update on the phase 1 stuff. Vitalik and I have been spending a lot of time on reward accounting, so the mechanisms inside of the state to kind of track what is going on in an APOC to do the reward accounting, and also design in phase 1 of just the micro incentives for the additional duties around cross-linking and others. Vitalik, anything on that?
And I think covered it pretty well. Like basically just a simplification of how rewards they're calculated. And this is also kind of coming on the heels of the other change to that we did in phase 1, where we basically just do a simplification of the accounting process, and so we don't have to keep track of pending attestation objects and so forth.
Yep. Other research updates?
From the BSC side, we are moving forward with the testing of the gossip sub 1 versus 1. So I'm going to post a link to a report in the chat. That's all.
Cool. you. Anything else? Okay. If you keep an eye on the IETF BLS specs, you've noticed that BLS has been bumped to a version 4, which is incompatible with the current version that we're on. This is a banning of the 0 private key, which doesn't really change much for us other than the allowing or the disallowment of the 0 public key. After some discussions internally and some discussions with BLSC library maintainers and the IETF spec maintainers, I believe that for the version 1 release, for the mainnet release, we will bump to this BLS version 4, and so that will be one minor additional incompatibility. If you're using the BLST, the BLAST library, they're working on an update now, which should be done very soon. So integrations to that BLS version 4 from them should be relatively easy. Using other libraries, this should be a very simple modification. Does anyone else have anything to add on this? Carl, Justin, or anyone that's been looking into it, or anybody have any questions or concerns about this change?
Maybe how are the talk with the other blockchain? Because maybe if everyone agrees to adopt V4, we won't need that much changes or wrapping.
So the there is a draft PR up right now that has all these wrappers to modify the V4 to allow for the 0 public key. We are, after some discussions, decided that we should just go with draft 4 and not have to do these wrappers. Sorry if that was not clear. That PR is still up, although is expected to be closed for a simplified just BLS version 4.
And second question, but maybe that will be for discussion in the spec repo. But it seems like there is a need for 0 public keys and signatures for phase 1, but not for phase 2. So I just wanted to have some clarification on which scenario allow or requires that.
So there's a difference here between the 0 public-private key being valid and empty aggregates being valid. There is a use case in phase 1 in which we do, the empty aggregates essentially are banned in phase 0 because of the way we handle the attestation processing, but there currently is a use case for having an empty aggregate with the way light client signatures are handled in phase 1. This is a much more simple wrapper than actually allowing for the 0 public key, and at least right now it's still in there, but we could also investigate ways to avoid it. Does that answer the question?
Yes, perfect.
Danny, just to confirm, there'll be a spec update, and then we'll agree to do a hard fork to implement this on Medasha, or we implement for mainnet. What's the plan? I mean, technically it's breaking, right? So
Yes,
we should have a v0.13.
Yeah, it is breaking. Right now I'm going to leave it as a PR, and the intention is to get into a v01, which would be the mainnet release. We can discuss how we want to treat this on Medasha. We can not upgrade, or the 0 public key does not currently exist on Medasha, so we could just quickly upgrade clients, but that could change at any moment. After I've been thinking about it, this is a little bit of another conversation. I think that we should probably moonlight Medasha around the start of mainnet for a couple of reasons. One, because we'll have a V1 a V1.0 spec at that point that will have minor inconsistencies such as this. And we will also, the vast majority of Medasha is run by users in the community, and I expect the vast majority of them to turn their nodes off as they turn on their mainnet nodes and to not really worry about testnet nodes anymore. If that is the case, it probably makes sense to have a clean slate testnet of V1 where we run a lot more of the validators. So in that case, for Medasha, we can support BLS version 3 for the time being, and knowing that we're going to moonlight it and not need to support it in a few months. Or we can choose to upgrade it. Right now, it's really easy to upgrade. That might change at any moment. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, why not both? Why not try to upgrade Medasha, but also have in mind that we might want to launch a new testnet towards mainnet launch?
Yeah, fair. So, I mean, in that sense, I can write some quick notes on what upgrading Medasha would look like. It should be relatively simple, and if we have buy-in and people want to do it, then we will do it.
So one other thing on all of this is in EIP 2333. I've been using there's a function called HKDF mod R, which is basically the BLS keygen from the specs. And now with the new spec change, that's not backwards compatible, so that's changed. So for what is very hopefully the last time, there is a minor change to the EIP to update to this new hashing mechanism. Here's a link to what the changes look like with the new test vectors.
While we talk about cryptographic EIP, our auditors, NCC, had some concern about input validation in EIP 2387, the one for key stores. They will put something in the Fellowship of Ethereum Magician forum, but they already did in the EIP pull requests also.
Carl, the practical implications of modifying that EIP at this point would be that if tools bumped to this new version, they would not be able to do key recovery. So for example, if a tool did not support this old version, the Medasha keys would not be able to be easily recovered with that tool. The simplest way there probably is to use an old version of that tool rather than supporting both. But yeah, there's not a huge loss on Medasha side. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, indeed, that's basically the risk there. So it makes it hard to recover keys based on your seed because you need to find a compatible EIP version. And if you wish to add more keys, that would also be something that's difficult to do. But as Danny said, hunting down an old version is probably worthwhile. And I think it's a worthwhile thing to have to rather squash this now and then have everything just lined up ahead of mainnet.
Thanks. Anything else on BLS version 4, BLS, IETF specs, anything here? Great. I wrote down API status. Client teams have generally gave us an update about implementing that during their update, so that was good. Is there anything worth discussing about the API at this point? I know the repo is generally pretty active. I just wanted to make sure that things are moving forward, but it seems that they are.
update here. And now that we're talking about APIs, the Beacon Chain Explorer is moving from the previous Prism API towards the Standard API. And so, although like currently there's a lot of focus on Validator API, in the future we maybe want to extend this for other users as block explorers, or maybe just users looking at their own nodes for performance reporting. So yeah, just account for that in the future.
Got it. Okay, networking. We had a call last week. It's productive. Is there any items people would like to discuss here?
One thing about networking, I've been working on this test runner that spins up testnets a little bit like the multi-client repository, but in a shorter-lived testnets, more contained, hooked to a test suite defined fully in YAML. So to make it easy to define network tests and then start and run different programs. It's a little bit like Hive, but more focused on just getting the ETH2 details right. Maybe eventually we'll try and merge it or run it in ETH1 Hive at some point. But yes, the core of this, I'll try and open source it soon, and then we can start running some multi-client network tests.
Great. Okay. General spec discussion. Anything here? Okay. Yep.
I don't know. Did we want to talk about the parameter changes for mainnet, or is that like basically done and decided at this point?
We can. If you saw a couple days ago, Vitalik and I released a Phase 0 EIP. Notably, there's a section that discusses the punitiveness of the initial launch and a suggestion to have a reduced punitiveness on the tail risk scenarios because if something does happen there, it's likely not an attack in the first handful of months. This specifically is the reduction of a 3x multiplier on proportional slashings to 1, a increase of the leak penalty quotient by a factor of 4, meaning it takes 4 times longer to have to leak to what previously was. This, in such a scenario like the Medasha incident, would have made, although it would have made it not quite as painful for users. And the minimum slashing penalty quotient is increased by a factor of 4, which makes the minimum slashing more around 0.25 ETH instead of 1 in the event that you're slashed. With the stated intention of upgrading to the full punitive parameters on the approximate 5-month time horizon after launch. This would give us a chance to practice a hard fork before Phase 1, and at the same time make it a little bit less, reduce the stakes a little bit for early stakers. Questions, thoughts?
We should probably run this in some sort of network before going live with it, just to make sure that all of our implementations are consistent. I mean, it's not complicated, right? But it's we should check.
So on that note, within the next couple of weeks, we'll release a V10, which will have these parameters and we'll have test vectors built off of these parameters. In addition to that, I would expect we should do a number of like multi-net like dry runs, and maybe proto stuff will be in the works as well, so that we can do dry runs, maybe not with the community, but we should probably do some 1.0 dry runs with ourselves, because it's going to include these minor parameter changes along with the BLS version 4. So I think there's enough to test. Anything else on that? Other spec-related items? Other spec-related items? Okay, general open discussion, closing remarks, anything here? Okay, I'll get that release out as soon as possible. I recommend prepping the Spadina configuration has been merged. I recommend prepping releases or whatever you need to do with the Spadina configuration, so that users can start messing around with it next week. Great. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you all soon.
Thanks, Danny. Bye all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.